Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do.
Here we go.
All my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk. Must be Tuesday night. I'm home for a change. It's been a hectic few weeks, guys, and of course, you guys know about all that stuff. So, hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. All kinds of nuggets in there. So, it's been a really fun few weeks. There's been some puzzles, some things going on, you know, making quite a few appointments, mostly for personal business. But I was thinking about it. John Dyer has been putting together some video shorts. Hello with Jeremy Day. Speaking of John Dyer, he just popped in here. He's been putting together some very cool videos. Hello, Tim Stewart. And I got to talk to Bill Cody a few minutes ago up in Magnolia, Ohio. And he said, I've been looking at your YouTube page. He said, man, I don't know how you're pulling off those short videos, but they're very creative. Hello, Bill Sharon. So, John, we get some compliments. And when Bill Cody pays a compliment, that's a pretty big deal. I've known Bill Cody, good gosh, now for, probably 23 or 24 years. And when he pays a compliment, that's a big deal. One of the videos that John put up was about crappie. And I'm not quite sure why, but that video just blew up. And I don't know if it fit the algorithms or the searches or whatever. Hello, Ron Krisman. Tim Stewart caught a 4.4-pound bass under 19 inches. That's pretty good. That's real good. That's actually stellar. Anyway, the crappie video took off. So I was thinking about it today when I was talking to Leanne. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to talk about crappie tonight. So there's several key points about crappie. Hello, Rick Wren. Good to see you. Good to see you, buddy. Mr. Cody gives some excellent advice on the forum. Yes, he does, Bill Sharon. He does. Bill Cody is one of the leading experts. He's a microbiologist who spends all kinds of time just looking through microscopes, studying algae, plankton, everything from blue-green algae to common algae to whatever could be living in the water, zooplankton. So he spends most of every day looking through a microscope at water. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but he's driven to do that, and he's the best in the nation. And hello, Mark Hicks. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for chiming in, checking in. Good to see you guys. Hey, you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like and share this video to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. We got some new ones in, and Leanne will do that. She does a drawing every once in a while. Randy Gaines, hello from North Central Ohio. I bet you guys are kind of frigid up there. Bill Cody lives in Magnolia, Ohio, by the way. After crappie, give me the lowdown on beavers. I had 2 show up. You know what? I'll talk to you about beavers. So let's talk about crappie just for a few minutes, and then we'll switch gears and start answering some of your questions. When somebody tells me they want to stock crappie, it's not because they want to catch these super sport fish that, bend the rod down like that. It's all about meat. It's all about white, flaky, sweet, tender meat to eat. That's what crappie are about. And that's why people want them. The thing about crappie that you got to know so you can decide what you want to do with them, if you want to stock some or not, is to know several real important facts. Number one, their mouth is too big to be small and too small to be big. So they're predatory fish. They eat other fish, insects, things like that. So they're predators. And they live, since their mouths are so small, they live eating the middle of the food chain. So that's one thing to remember, is they can't eat big morsels. They got to eat small ones. The second thing to know is they're real erratic spawners. So some years they spawn, some years they don't. So you need to know that, because they're unpredictable. The second thing, or third thing to know about them, is when they spawn first in warm water fish ponds. So if you've got crappie south of the Mason-Dixon line, and you don't have something like yellow perch or walleye or fish like that, walleye aren't going to reproduce anyway, but if you got smallmouth, yellow perch, things like that, they'll spawn before crappie do. But if you've got largemouth bass, bluegill, red ear sunfish, the different shad species. Hello, Jim Allen. Hello, Jason Dodd. Hello, Vito Barnes. Good to see you guys. Beat those chickens in from the burrow. Whitesboro, that is. Movie stars. Oh, wait, that's the Beverly Hillbillies. Hold up. So, the other thing to know about crappie is that they have a tendency to overpopulate. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we don't come across lakes with outstanding crappie, small ponds, every once in a while, but not very often. Because typically what happens is they'll do great for a few years. You'll catch a bunch of 10 to 14-inch crappie. Then all of a sudden the thing turns upside down and all you're catching is 4 to 5-inch crappie, a little bit thicker than a postage stamp. So crappie, most biologists, and I'm in this camp, I think you need to have at least 20 acres of water before you start crappie. And you got to have the right habitat. Because remember the formulas, guys. I harp on this all the time. Happy water, habitat, food chain, the right genetics, and what's the other one? Harvest. So if you've got all those things in place, you got the right kind of habitat for crappie. Because think about it. You crappie anglers out there. Hello, Harrison Davis. When you start thinking about crappie, you're only going to catch them about 3 weeks out of the year, typically. And that's most of the time when they're spawning or in the fall when they come up shallow to feed. Well, if you're going to have crappie, it's a good idea to have some crappie habitat out in the middle of the lake. I tell you what's perfect is a great big oak tree with no leaves on it. Crappie love to orient to that sort of thing. So if you've got some kind of habitat out in the middle, crappie will migrate after they spawn. They'll migrate to the middle. They'll rise up and down in the water column, and they're always looking for structure. If they don't have it, they'll spread out randomly in small schools, and you may catch them, you may not. I don't know if Bay Miltonberger's watching or not, but in his lake, he's got a bunch of habitat now because he's done some habitat improvement. But the crappie would bundle up under his dock. We saw him on live scope this time last year, thousands of them under his dock because that was the best habitat. The other habitat is he's got a tall overflow pipe. It's a flood control lake, so it's a big, tall overflow. There's Bay checking in. Hey, say hello to Paula. Cheers to Paula. I'm glad Bay's wife, Paula, she's watching the show. Wow, that's pretty amazing to me. I love that. Thank you for chiming in and checking in. So Bay has got crappie when they're there, hanging out by that concrete overflow pipe. Hello, Mike Wharton. Good to see you. I'm Bob. Good to see you, Jeff Wharton. Maybe you're talking about Bill Cody. I'll cut you a little slack. So the other thing about crappie is there's two species. Had a guy chime in on that YouTube video when I answered his comment, and he was saying that there's more than two species. Well, there's really not. There's two species. There's black crappie, white crappie. There's different strains within those species. The white crappie have a tendency to get maybe a little bit bigger, and they reproduce more than the black crappie. But black crappie have a tendency to get larger in depth. So they maybe not weigh quite as much, but I've seen some pretty big crappie, big white crappie and black crappie. The way to tell the difference, it's not by the color. That's a myth. The best way to tell the difference between a black crappie and a white crappie is to count the hard rays on the dorsal fin. So there's hard spines at the front of the dorsal fin. If you count those, if there's 7 or more, it's a black crappie. If it's less than 7, it's a white crappie. It's pretty simple. The white crappie's dorsal fin also sits back farther toward the tail than a black crappie's does. Now, one of the things the guy pointed out is that there's some crappie that are native to the White River watershed. They have a black stripe. And Bay's got some of these. There's a black stripe that comes from the tip of their nose all the way up to their dorsal fin. And those crappie are black crappie. They're just a strain within that species. So there's some tips about crappie. If you got questions about crappie, ask me and I'll see if I can pitch them out there. Let's see here now. I'm going to go back up here to Jeremy Day's question. What's the lowdown on beavers? I had 2 show up. Well, golly, this is probably 1984. I got a call from a client when I had just moved to Whitesboro and started taking on some pond management clients in 1984 there, up north of Dallas-Fort Worth, west of Sherman, along the Red River. And this guy called me, and he said, "Man, I'm seeing some trees getting knocked down. I think I think there's beavers. And I think they're eating my fish." Well, I knew nothing about beavers. It made sense to me. So I went and looked, and sure enough, he had a bunch of willow trees that had been chewed up, chewed out, chewed down, and the limbs dragged off and went up the creek in his watershed, and there was a lodge that they'd built. And they'd probably been doing it for months, maybe even a couple of years, because there were some dead sticks in there. Things have been there a long time. They're all dead, but some of them don't look dead. Some of them look fresh, which they are. Need a sip. So I called, by that time I'd made an acquaintance that was a trapper. So I called that guy. I said, "Hey, you know anything about trapping beavers?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I got some conibear 330s. You want to learn how to do it?" I said, "You bet, let's go." I was in my 20s. So I think 29, 28, something like that. And so I went with him and we set these conibears. And if you've never set a conibear trap, do it with somebody that knows what they're doing. Of course, you got YouTube videos now, but you got to be damn careful with those things because they can snap your arm in half. So we found several slides, and we found where the beavers were going into their lodge. So we set like 5 traps, and we set those in one afternoon. And he wanted me to meet him over there the next morning, and we went over there the next morning. We had 3 beavers. Well, being a biologist kind of person, I wanted to see what they were all about. So I didn't want them to go to waste. I didn't know that I wanted to eat a beaver. I wasn't that hungry, but I understand they're pretty tasty, but I've not done that. But I didn't want the hides to go to waste. So I took them home and I skinned them, and I thought, man, I got to find out, how many fish are in their bellies. And I cut their bellies open. After I skinned it, then I cut it up the belly, opened it up to the stomach, and the stomach was packed full of food. Guess what was in there? Sawdust. Beavers don't eat fish. Beavers eat the cambium layers, the outer layers of the tree. That's where they get their nutrition. And I later learned that there's some beneficial microbes, probiotics, if you will, that live in their gut that digests that food, that woody material for them, and that's where they get their nutrition. So the biggest problem about beavers is they're going to cut down trees that you like. So Jeremy Day, your choices are to let them be or to trap them. Now there are ways to trap them live and relocate them, but I don't have any neighbors I dislike enough to go do that and release them. But I don't know how to trap them live. But there are trappers that's what they get paid to do. Some of them are with the AgriLife Extension Service, and you can find out who they are through Texas A&M. So there's my skinny on beavers. Let me scroll back up and make sure I'm not missing anything here. All right, it's now a good time. Jason Dodd, Wichita, Kansas, is now a good time to send water samples to TAMU since everything in the pond water is currently dormant. By the way, Jason Dodd, Bill Cody submitted a couple of articles, and I went through one of them yesterday or day before, and you're involved in that. I think there's some pictures you sent him. You and I had that conversation. When I went through that article, it's pretty good. It's Talking Points About Bass. That will be in the January-February issue of Pond Boss, which is just about ready to go to layout. And I'm hoping we can get it mailed pretty close to the 1st of January. So now is now a good time. Yeah, now's a good time to send water samples to Texas A&M University. And here's why. If you send a sample in the middle of the summertime, some of the nutrients and minerals are taken up by plants. So they're not necessarily dissolved in the water. Whereas now the plants are dormant. Your plankton is gone. Things have shifted gears, and you can get a more true reading of what's in your water this time of year. So I'm going to say yes. And if you go to the Soil Sciences Lab, there's 2 labs at A&M that test water. There's the Soil Sciences Lab, and you can find the water testing stuff. If you go to Texas A&M University, look up the Soil Sciences Department, you can find forms there that you can download and fill out, and do the $40 sample. The other one is to get in touch with the Aquatic Diagnostic Lab, which is run by Dr. Todd Sink. And he's looking more about the biology. He does water chemistry testing, but he's more looking about how the biology of that water is affected. Bluegills and stunted bass both taste good. Yes, they do. They're very tasty. So let's see here. What about the new hybrid crappie? Well, they do spawn, and they can't physically reproduce as what they are. And the first hatchery, and they call those Magnolia crappies, what they call those. That's the kind of the trade name. But I haven't heard a lot of good reports about them because they do reproduce, maybe not as prolifically as either black crappie or white crappie, but still prolifically enough that they can still overpopulate. That was another point about the crappie, black crappie and white crappie. Even though black crappie reproduce less, they still reproduce too much when they do reproduce. And they may go 3 years in a row and spawn great, then miss 2 years, then spawn a year, skip a year. It's unpredictable. Greg McMillan checking in from over near Argyle, America. Hi, Bob. Water's looking happier. Good. You know what? You're doing some cutting edge stuff there. Greg McMillan is working with Landon Wyatt at Natural Lake Biosciences because Greg McMillan is really, really pushing his pond to grow as many big fish as he can, and he's doing a good job of that. And he's now dialed in on the water because that's going to be the limiting factor. Kendall Brown, look out, Bob. What am I looking out for? Something going on behind me? One of those fish fixing to whack me? Thanks, Kendall. Chuck Anzalone. Hadn't seen Chuck in a while. Good to see Chuck checking in. He's got the deal. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. There you go. Mark Hicks. I stocked my 2.5 acre pond with 300 hybrid black crappie Magnolia crappie. They're 2 years old and average 10 inches, but they're skinny. I have plenty of forage, golden shiners, and fat images. How long does it take for them to fill out? Well, I'm going to give you my opinion without looking at it. They wouldn't be that long unless they had the body condition to go with it. They gain weight before they gain length. So if they're thin, that means they've lost weight. And there's got to be a reason for that. Typically, it's because they're overcrowded for the food size, the morsel size that they need to eat. That's probably what's going on. Mike Wharton, he and I had a good conversation. The struggle to adequately harvest crappie is real. Yes, it is. How many fish or pounds per acre would be the target if possible in 20-plus acre lake? If a 20-plus acre lake is doing well with crappie, the standing crop is typically 20 to 30 pounds per acre if there's enough habitat to support that much. Otherwise, it will be less. And so when you figure that if it's, you got a 20 acre lake and you got 25 pounds of crappie per acre, that's 500 pounds of crappie. That could be 1,500 crappie. Be 1,800 crappie. It could be 650. And so I don't know. If Harrison Davis, if someone accidentally dumped a bucket of crappie into a bass bluegill pond, which species would cause the least destruction? I don't know how anybody accidentally dumps a bucket of crappie into a bass bluegill pond. That's like an intentional deal, but that's not the question, right? If someone accidentally dumped a bucket of crappie into a bass bluegill pond, which species would cause the least destruction? Well, here's how I'm going to answer that. Depends on how big the bucket of crappie were. If the crappie were 3 to 4 inches in an existing bass bluegill pond, odds are pretty good the bass will thin their numbers out. Odds are also pretty good they won't eradicate them. Because once the crappie are there, they're going to take foothold, and if they've got everything they need, they're going to thrive and they're going to reproduce. Best crappie fishing my son and I have ever experienced was in the lake near Hyco, Texas. Great eating. I wonder if that might be Bay Miltonburg. Yes, it was. Yes, it is. Yes, it still is. Going back to Harrison Davis, I kind of blew by that a little quick. Which species would cause the least destruction? The bluegill. The bluegill are always helpful, no matter what, whether it's bass, crappie, bluegill, channel catfish, whatever. Hello, Tom Davis. Good to see you. I bet your teeth are chattering there in Ohio. Talked to my good friend Bucky Lanehart today up in upstate New York. They had 15 inches of snow on the ground. Wind chill was about 0. Temperature was 14 degrees when I talked to him. He was hunkered down inside. Now look at here. Let's listen. Look at Tim Sturt showing off. Beavers had an extremely high intestine-to-body-weight ratio. Let's think about that a minute. Beavers have an extremely high intestine-to-body-weight ratio. Is that intestine weight? Well, here's the gist of that statement. It takes a long time for a digestive system to digest cellulose. Like people can't. We don't have it. But a beaver can. And the longer that food sits in the digestive system, the more efficient those microbes are at reducing that mass to food. Did you know that beaver poop floats? I didn't really say that. Debbie's in there, but she's not listening. She would have thrown something at me. Look at that. Look at Leanne coming in here, checking out that. She's putting it up there so you guys can click on it and go. There's a little distillery about 20 miles from here called Sledge, near Toller. It takes it between Toller and Glenrose. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's a very cool venue. Bay, you and Paula might want to go over there one of these days on the weekend, spend a couple hours in the spring or summer. They have live music on the weekends, all these cool products. This is a pecan-flavored bourbon. It's pretty good. Chuck Anzalone, getting ready to put some 2-inch Titan fingerlings in my pond. Are they too small to put a floy tag in? Yes, they are. 2-inch Titan fingerlings are too small. If so, is there any other way to identify them? I tell you, when you first get them, they've got this, and Bay will testify to this because he saw a bunch of these. They've got an iridescent light green dot right on the top of their head, right behind their eyes. That's a way to identify them. Now, as they get a little bit bigger, that dot fades out. But I don't know how scientific you want to get, but you can get down the road 3 or 4 years and have some of those fish. You can tag them with floy tags then. You know, in a couple of years, after they're up 8 to 10 to 12 inches long, even in a year. And you can also do some genetic testing. And so by stocking Titan bass, what that tells me is you want to grow some really huge fish. So, but you can't tag a 2-inch bass. Just doesn't work. You kill it. John Dyer checking in again. Virgil Meyer, you can see Virgil. Josh Milchewski. Josh? Hey, Josh, is there a decent sales pitch to a pond owner about to skimp on genetics after spending a lot? Oh, man. Here we go. You're going to get me going on this one. Here's a rule of thumb. This is an absolute truth about lake building. It never costs what you think it's going to cost. Take that to the bank because you're going to need more money. When a lake is being built, there's too many unknowns. You know, even the best contractors. Tim Stewart sent me a picture here. Here I am live, and he sent me a picture of that giant bass. Here we go. I'm going to show it to you. There it is right there. There's Tim Stewart's bass in living color. Thanks, Tim. Can't believe I'm picking up my phone while I'm doing a live broadcast. Kind of makes sense. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So, one of the things I tell people is once you start getting bids to build a dam, automatically add 25% to that. And it's not because these earth-moving guys, these lake builders, underbid it on purpose. They don't. It's a lot because we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what's under the ground. So when they start moving dirt, and let's say they need X number of cubic yards of clay and they think they've got it figured out, and then they get in there and find out they don't, they got to go get some clay from somewhere. Or one of the classic ones is when the dirt guy starts building the core trench and he's got to go down 6 feet deeper than he thought he did, even with test holes. You can't, I mean, I remember Otto building a 100-acre lake years and years and years ago, probably 20 years ago, maybe not that long, 15 years ago. And an engineering firm came out and they did core samples with an auger. They brought like a well drilling machine out there and they went all through the bottom of the basin to where the dam was going to be. And they dug like 30 different test holes to figure out the soils. Well, what happened, and they came back with a report, and here's how much it's going to cost. Well, when Otto got into it, what he found was right there in the toe of that dam where the dam was going to sit, just right in the middle of it, there was a creek. And the creek went straight through and then left the property and flowed down into the Ouachita River in Oklahoma, not far from Jimmy Houston's place. Matter of fact, right next door to Blake Shelton's place, before Blake bought that place. And so when Otto started digging, he started hitting veins of gravel. And what he figured out was that over eons, that creek had meandered through that low spot, and during different kinds of flood events, it would change courses. Well, that creek changed courses so many times that as he went down, he ended up having to go 20 feet below natural ground level to get beneath the gravel of where that creek had meandered eons ago, hundreds of years ago. And so that lake costs a lot more. Well, here's where I'm going. Almost every time somebody builds a lake, it costs more than they think it will. And then they want to come to me when it's time to stock it, and here's the comment: hey, Bob, listen, we went really far over our budget on building the lake. We're going to have to cut back on stocking the fish. Bad choice. Sell a car. Borrow some money against one of your kids. Stock the lake right. Don't skimp. Because if you don't stock it right based on your goals and your timeline, you're not going to know it for 3 years. And once you get down the road 3 years, that cucumber's been in the vinegar and you ain't going to unpickle that mess. It's going to be what it is, and then you got to try to deal with it. So figure out how to do it right. Is there a decent sales pitch? That's a pretty decent sales pitch right there. Don't skimp on the numbers of fish and don't skimp on the genetics. Once we know what your goal is and what the mission is, we can figure out the genetics that suit that situation. And I'm a big fan of using local genetics. Like the Titan bass, not only do the guys at Red Hills Hatchery have, their pure strain Florida bass, the Titan bass are ones that have more genetic markers for trophy potential than just regular pure strain Florida bass, which pure strain Florida bass have trophy potential, but they're not going to live in Virgil Myers Lake in Iowa. It's too cold, so you need to use genetics that are local. So I don't think I would skimp on the genetics if your mission is that you want to grow big fish. I wouldn't skimp on stocking the numbers of fish to meet your timeline. Okay, Ron Krisman, thoughts on pellet training crappie? Several people have tried that. They just don't get the return. Just such a small fraction of them at these fish hatcheries, a tiny fraction of them can be trained to pellets, but not enough. Out of 10,000, there might be 50 that will feed train, and the economics of that just doesn't work. Let's see here, Daniel Weaver. Let's see what Daniel's got going on here. Is crappie overpopulation more of a problem in the South? Don't seem to hear the problems here in the Northeast Ohio. Most people love them. Crappie overpopulation is a bigger problem in the South. It's inevitable in the North. It just takes longer because your growing season for crappie is shorter. They maximize their growing season. They're not quite as prolific because you get such shifts in weather when it's spawning season, and they spawn later than do your smallmouth bass and yellow perch and fish like that. Harrison Davis, I meant white or black crappie. Which one they both do the same harm. Black and white crappie, doesn't matter. Doesn't make any difference. Okay, pellet training, Vito's chiming in on frequently diagnosed. Yep. Dude, Vito's been raising kids a while. You can tell that by this answer. Start by rewarding them frequently for desired behaviors. As your fish learns, gradually reduce the frequency of treats and incorporate real-life rewards to maintain their interest and reinforce. That's what I did with my kids. There's Wyatt. Wyatt's either near Abilene, Texas, or at a fire station around Denver, Colorado. You might have covered this. Do you have info on the prints from the book? I can sure give you some of that. Matter of fact, it's time to do that. Hey, let's talk about this first. Pond Boss Magazine, cheaper than a Friday night date, $35 a year, and it lasts a year. If you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss, I'm going to invite you to please do that. You can do that from the Pond Boss website, or you can call the office at 903-564-6144, and Leanne will be happy to chime in and make sure that you get signed up. So the book, we're going through it's going through layout right now, and I'm hoping it'll be done layout by early next week. I don't believe we're going to get it printed before Christmas, which I hoped we would. It's just taking a little longer, but we're being picky about how we get it laid out. The prints. So the prints, what Jason's or what Wyatt's talking about is we've got like 30 cartoons in that book, and they cost a lot, but they're great. They're professional watercolor paintings, and what we've done is we're going to print 5 of each one of those cartoons. And as we get closer to the print time, we'll start putting up some pictures of those different cartoons. And the proposal I'm going to pitch out there is, if you just want to buy the book, it's $35, which that includes shipping, because it's going to cost a lot to print it. It costs quite a bit to produce it. Now, what this book is called, it's called Baseball and Other Fish Tales. And the backstory on that is, a couple of years ago, my oldest son, Ty, said, "Hey, Dad, you got some cool stories. Would you write them down?" I thought, how many times have I sat around a campfire with an old guy who's got great stories and asked him if he's written them down? And he didn't. And then he died and they're gone. So I've got some pretty cool stories. And there's a lot of cool things that have happened to me over 70 years worth of living and 46 years worth of being in the fisheries business. So I went back in and I picked out, I think, 30 stories, of which I didn't have any pictures. And half of them are about baseball. I umpired baseball for 20 years, and I've got some very cool baseball stories. So if you like baseball, life stories, and some fish stuff, this first book is a collection of those. Now I'm working on a second one, which will have more. There won't be any baseball stories in the second part, but I've got like 60 stories written down. And some of them are gut-wrenching, some of them are funny as heck. Some of them are almost unbelievable. Like, did that really happen? Yeah, it did. So where I'm going with that is, if you'd like to have an 8.5 by 11 print on good quality cardstock paper of those cartoons, we're only going to print 5 of each cartoon. What I want to do is I want to sell those cartoons for $100. They're suitable for framing, and for that $100, you get a print of that cartoon you choose and a book, and I'll sign the book and send that to you. So that's my business proposal. So there'll be some, you can, I think, scroll down on this Facebook page and you can see the cover of the book and you can see one of the cartoons. And I'll get Leanne to start putting a few copies of cartoons up here. Let's see, while we're doing commercials, let's do Texas Hunter. Texas Hunter products. I was, got to take my grandkids, this is kind of a fun story. I got to take my son by marriage. People call them stepsons. I want to call him my son, Taylor. And they're 2 oldest boys, and I took them deer hunting about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It wasn't really a hunt. There were so many animals on that property, they needed to harvest a bunch of animals. Well, the landowner said, "Okay, here's the rules. You got to shoot 2 does before anybody can shoot a buck." Well, what I thought that meant was everybody had to shoot 2 does before he could shoot a buck. So there was 5 of us. We shot 10 does. And we shot, 4 bucks and a red deer, 3 pigs, and a raccoon and a turkey. Well, we sent all that meat, 16 deer, in to be processed, and I met the caretaker of the ranch today and picked up all that venison. Taylor came and got his, hauled it to his house. I got ours, and then some for son Jonathan, and I took those down there. And so on that ranch, every time I turned the corner, there was a Texas Hunter feeder somewhere, either feeding fish or feeding deer or feeding pigs. They even feed the pigs so they can get them confined in an area where they can try to trap them. The hogs are everywhere on that ranch. Ranch between Archer City and Seymour, Texas is where it was. So Texas Hunter products, I love those guys. They've got great products. They've got great customer service. If you're looking to feed fish, they've got a line of habitat, fish habitat that you can look at. But go to TexasHunterProducts.com and you see what I'm talking about. Purina Mills. I've been working with one of the big dogs at Purina Mills, to try to figure out how we can get a little bit better customer service. Maybe even do another run of Aquamax largemouth. I don't know how that's going to go, but I'm pitching that at them, and we'll see. And Purina Mills, great fish food. I love them. Easy Docks of Texas, David Schneiderman. I don't see him on here today, but he's one of our sponsors, and we appreciate him. BirdDogIt.com. Check that out. That's a very unique business model that son Jonathan Lusk is doing, and it's totally different business approach than what I'm used to. I'm used to go do the work, get paid, pay the bills. What he's doing is building equity as he builds cash flow and creating a user-friendly interface. His whole effort has been spent on building the vehicle to create the opportunity for landowners to have some benefits, sell some hunts, hunters go hunt. Check out birddogit.com when you get a minute. So there's all my spins for the day, my commercials. Jason Dodd, Metaflock says you should apply when water temperature is above 50 degrees. Is it okay to apply now when the water is colder, or wait until spring? If you know what, I don't have a great answer for that, but I'm going to tell you this. Metaflock, I would call whoever reps for them and tell them your specific situation, because you got to have a reason that you're going to put Metaflock in. If you want to sequester phosphorus, 50 degrees is probably better than 80, because if you're going to sequester phosphorus, you need to get it while it's in the water, not while it's in plankton or algae or something, or plants. Harrison Davis, do female largemouth bass ever guard their nest? They do not guard the nest. So here's the way that works. They don't ever guard the nest, but what they will do is they'll defend the nest when they're getting ready to lay eggs in it. So like when these guides are out sight fishing for big fish, they're typically not catching those bass while they're on the nest, because the male's guarding the nest, but you can pretty well bet that huge female is not far from it when she's ripe and ready. And when that's going on, Harrison, that female is so dialed in on reproducing that she doesn't want to be interfered with on that. So if anything distracts that fish, they want to get rid of the distraction. So the male guards the nest. The male builds the nest. The male guards the nest. The male goes out when a ripe female comes near, and he bumps her 4 or 5 times, 15 times, whatever, starts running into her side to guide her to that nest. And then when she gets to that nest, she'll lay her eggs. And then when she's laid all the eggs she can or wants to, then he'll fertilize those eggs right then, and he'll stay right there with them. And then she may go 15 feet away from the nest until the next, because they don't necessarily lay all their eggs in one nest. They'll lay some here and then go over to another nest over there and lay eggs over there. They're pretty promiscuous about that. But that's part of nature's way to keep genetic diversity. Do a little water. So that's how that works. See what Jim Allen's got here. We got some comments going on. Jim Allen, the builder we picked for our house was chosen because I asked how much do new homes typically run over. He said $70,000 to $80,000 because of the ladies. I'm going to leave that laying right where it is. Hey, Jason Dodd, there's your answer, buddy. Heather Newhart, she's in that business. Heather, we need to talk. Email me with your phone number. Bob Lusk at Outlook.com or info@pondboss.com. Mark Hicks, you know the deal. Jeremy Day, how big trees will the beavers eat? I got plenty of small ones I would not mind losing. Then don't take the beavers out yet. And what they'll do is they'll chew them off about 1 foot, 18 inches above the ground. They'll leave what looks like a pencil lead sticking up. So leave a stump. But I have seen them, and it's really interesting because when you start studying beavers long term in a situation like what you've got, is once the beavers build their lodge and they reproduce, the young male beavers will get kicked out of the home at some point. They got to go start their own gig. But until that happens, they're learning how to chew down trees. And they may go to a live oak or a post oak or a huge hardwood tree and girdle it. So what they'll do is they'll go chew the bark off all the way around it, but the wood's so hard they can't chew through it. So they'll just kill the tree. They won't cut it down. Christopher Aguilar checking in from South Louisiana. Oh, Baby wants to see some cartoons. Good for the pool table. They would be real good for the pool table room. You know what? I'll make a deal with you. So we'll see some cartoons. I'll figure out. I'll talk to Leanne. We'll figure that out. You know, we can actually. I think we can. She didn't want to email them because people will print them. You know what? We'll work that out. Work that out with you, Bay. We'll figure that out. Daniel Weaver. They munched up to 12 to 14-inch diameter trees up there. Yeah, they'll do that. So like willow trees, you know, sycamore trees, softer wood trees, they will cut down. I've seen them cut down 8 to 10-inch trees fairly often. You know, willow trees, I've seen them cut down willow trees that are 18 inches in diameter. It takes them a while, but they'll do that. And they leave a big old pile of sawdust. They only swallow the outside layers of the tree. They won't swallow any of the stuff that's in the gut. Love the book reviews. Can't wait to read it. Have you ever had to throw out parents during a t-ball game? When I was the coach for one of my son's teams, 2 parents got into a fist fight. Kids were crying. I felt terrible for them. Parents were rejected for the remainder of the season. Oh my gosh! You want to hear a baseball story, Bill? Let me scroll. I'll tell you about. I'll tell you one that's really. It's a great story, and it's in the book, by the way. Jeremy Day, I've only seen them once. We have a creek. I think they travel. Yeah, they'll travel. Hello, Randy Gaines. Sorry this is long-winded. I need some advice. Northern Ohio, new half-acre pond. Stocked 2.5 years ago with 100 native bluegill, 100 hybrid bluegill, 50 largemouth bass, 50 yellow perch, 50 walleye. The pond has flourished, and the bluegill have spawned several times, and I have original stockers. 1.45 to 1.57. That's pretty accurate. Offspring, bluegill, 9.5 inches. That's great. 1.1 pounds plus. However, have elevated ammonia, nitrates, and phosphates, which cause some minor largemouth bass, yellow perch loss. I suspect I created this by pushing my fish. But yes, you did. Yes, it is. Geese will do that. I've made arrangements with natural waterscapes to you have to correct this once the ice leaves. It's a good testimony right there. You haven't done any culling. Let me see, go back up here. 2.5 years. And you're part of the country. You're almost to the point where you want to be picky about culling with a relative. As a matter of fact, there's going to be an article in the January issue of Pond Boss that just drills down into that concept of selective harvest. Aeration is going to be one of your best bets. Hey, Bob. Howdy, Bob. Dinner's so good I forgot about you. I hope it was a steak. I have several wild black walnut trees a couple hundred feet from my pond. During heavy rain and the runoff from that area is dark brown tannins. I know that walnuts are harmful to fish, but I'm sure about the walnut tannins. That's actually what's harmful to the fish, is the tannins in the walnut trees. The walnuts are not necessarily toxic, but the husk of the walnuts are. Christopher Aguilar saw a dead river otter on the road. Good. Hope you ran over it twice. No, I really didn't say it. Baseball story. Okay. So I started umpiring baseball when I was 18 years old, and I had some really good mentors. And by the time I was 23, this must have been like 1978, I was selected to umpire Southwest Conference baseball as a student at Texas A&M University, which was interesting because there were 9 schools in the conference at that time, well, the whole time. And the way it worked is the baseball coaches would have their winter meeting, and they would present a list of umpires. And all the coaches except that coach got to vote on the umpires. And if you got more than one no vote, you're out. You know, so if Arkansas came to Texas A&M and I didn't do a good job and they didn't like me and they voted no, and one of the coaches voted no, I'd be out. Well, I umpired Southwest Conference baseball for like 4 years. And by that time, I'd gotten out of school. I was trying to build a business. I just didn't have time. But while I was at A&M, I was probably 20, 21 maybe, I got a call from my mentor in Fort Worth where I grew up. So I moved from Fort Worth to College Station to go to A&M. Well, John Chance, my mentor there, I'd worked youth baseball for him for a couple of years before I moved to College Station. Well, he called me and says, hey, man, I got a problem, coach, I want you to help me with. And I said, well, what's he doing? He said, well, he doesn't treat the kids right, and he's disrespectful to the umpires. And all I've got's young umpires younger than you. Well, shit, I was 20, 21 years old. We had guys 17 and 18 out there umpiring, and they didn't know how to handle a coach. Well, by that time, I was doing college baseball, and I knew how to handle a coach. I'd been mentored right, not only by John Chance in Fort Worth, but by a fellow named Harry Crenshaw, who was a Southwest Conference umpire there in Bryan College Station. He was a junior high principal there. So, John wanted me to drive from College Station on a Saturday to Fort Worth to umpire 2 ball games where the kids were Bronco League, I think 10, 11, 12 years old, or 11 and 12, I think. So, they're going to pay like $30. Well, of course, gasoline at that time was 59 cents a gallon or something stupid. So I would walk across a bed of nails to bring John Chance a glass of lemonade. So of course I said, sure, I'll do that. So I drove up there, and sure enough, I was paired with a 17-year-old umpire. And something else, I asked John, I said, tell me about this coach. He says, no, I'm not going to tell you anything. If he does something, you'll know. Because he didn't want me going looking for that coach, which was a smart thing on his part. So I got up there to that game, and they were getting toward the end of the season at that point. It was in June or something, I can't remember. And I had summer school at A&M that year. So it was in late May, June, somewhere through there toward the end of the season. And I learned when I got there that if this one team won, well, they win the championship. If they didn't, then they'd have to play again to win the championship. So I took the plate because I didn't know this other umpire, and he'd only worked 8 or 10 games. So by that time I had, 4 years worth of umpiring under my belt. So I took the plate. And the first thing I always did was get to know the catcher. Say, hey, catch, tell me about the pitcher. Well, he throws a curved ball. In that league they don't. But tell me about, so I built a rapport with the catcher because they're typically my liaison, to the rest of the team, because the catcher is usually the team leader. And so this little kid's name was Cody. I'll always remember Cody. And first couple innings went great. And then in the third inning, Cody's team's winning by 1 or 2 runs, something like that. Well, there's a pitch comes right down the middle. I called a strike, and Cody missed it. Catchers don't miss strikes down the pipe. He missed it. Boy, his voice boomed from the dugout. Catch the ball, Cody! I snapped around, looked over there, see who it was. I couldn't tell which one it was because there were 3 coaches in the dugout. Well, another pitch strike. Cody missed it again. And Coach just boomed out there. Just, catch the ball, Cody! Ugly. And I looked at him, and I took 2 or 3 steps. I said, I don't want to hear that. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't say anything. Well, then a pitch comes inside. Cody couldn't have caught it if he had a step ladder. And that coach boomed out at him again. And I went over there, and I put my finger in his face and said, I don't put up with that. You're not going to treat these kids like that. You can leave the game if you do that more. Well, you can't do that. Try me. And here, this guy's in his 40s, and here I am, 20, 21 years old, telling this guy to shut up, basically. Well, that kid gets a hit. The next kid walks. We got runners at first and second. Pitch outside. Cody misses it. The runners advance, and the coach yells at him again. So I go over there, hop up on 1 foot, and I throw him out of the game. Well, by that time, a league official's watching what's going on. He's leaning on the fence. Well, this is the guy I've been hearing about. So I throw him out of the game. He said, I'm not leaving. I looked at my watch. I said, all right, you got 60 seconds to get off the field. And if you're not off the field, this is a forfeit. You lose 7-0. You can't do that. Yes, I can. Look, the league official said, yes, he can, and he will. And the guy went out, and he sat in the bleachers. And I said, no, that ain't going to work. I tell you what, I want you to go out, get in your car, turn it around, face it away from the field, and do not leave. If you leave, this game is over, your team forfeits. And he got up like a puppy with his tail between his legs, and he walked out, and I stood there and watched him get in his car, turn the car around, and he faced it away from the field. Well, after that, little Cody settled down, had a good game. They went on and won the game. Well, after the game, I go out to the car, and I'm talking to that 17-year-old kid, and, the league official says he's been needing that all year. And so I go out and we start to switch gear, and I'm taking off my gear, and I look up, and here comes three women walking right toward me. And they get right to the car, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm fixing to get my ass chewed out right here. And the woman in the middle that was leading the pack, she looked me right in the eye, and she says, Blue, thank you for doing that. He's needed that all year. She said, that's my husband, and Cody is our son. And he's been doing that all year long. Thank you for doing that. He's needed it. Well, I mean, I hope a chill just went down your spine, because that's what happened to me that day, because that guy was just berating his own son, and that just isn't going to work, And so then I saw the guy get out of his car and walk over and talk to the league official. Now, there's a lot more to the story than what I'm telling you, and I wrote it in the book, so you can read about it, because there's a couple of details that are really pretty funny that I'm leaving out on this story. And the league official came up to me before we started the second game. He says, he came over and he resigned his position as head coach, and he's really ashamed of his behavior, and you did him a favor. And thank you. And it was good. I loved it. So there's a baseball story, but there's like 15 of those. All right, let me see here. Bill Shrum, I want to buy a book with the print. Remind me what's the deal you have on that. It's $100 for the print. There's only going to be 5 of each cartoon, and you get a book with that, and the book is to be autographed. So Leanne will have more details on that. I think there's something on the Facebook page, but she's also put something on the Pond Boss website, I'm pretty sure. Matthew Eberly, I think, you know what, you connected with me, or I connected with you. You asked for a connection on LinkedIn. I did that today. I'm a junior bio and agricultural engineering student at A&M. Any advice on how I can use that degree with something to do with ponds and lakes? I've spent hours watching these Facebook Lives starting back in grade school. Fascinating stuff. I've appreciated every bit of it. That's pretty funny. I love that. Grade school. Jeez. The way these Facebook Lives things started, this was, golly, 12 or 13 years ago. Debbie was watching Last Man Standing with Tim Allen. And at the end of that, he manages an outdoor goods store, kind of like a Bass Pro Shops. And at the end, he always did a video blog. And Debbie said, and I'll get to your answer here in a minute. But Debbie said, you know what, you should do that. Well, after a couple of years, the listener encouraged me to do that. I said, you know what, you build me a freaking set and I'll do it. She built a set and I started doing it. And that was like 8 or 9 years ago. So, Matthew, I'm glad to see you, buddy. You do not have to have a degree to get into the pond management business. So my answer to you is, yes, you can use that degree, but you've got to have a thirst for knowledge, because we're all in the same boat. We don't know what we don't know. And if you've been watching all these Facebook Lives, you know more about it than I do. But what I would do is I would join up with a pond management company. You're a junior at A&M. I've been talking to Dr. Lopez, the department head of the Range, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management Department, about how we can put some students to work in building a model of a pond management, lake management business utilizing students, especially students that are passionate about it. And he and I are talking about that, and I hope something comes from that. You could be involved in that if and when we get it put together. And we're going to be talking about that here in a couple of days. Matter of fact, I got a meeting with Real Well Friday morning, I think. Bill Shrum likes the story. And by the way, I absolutely love the fact that you're watching these videos and that we've connected. Email me. Just email me at info@pondboss.com with your phone number, and I'll call you and we'll talk about it. And I will do that. Do I have an interesting crappie story, John Dyer says. Oh boy, an interesting crappie story. Yeah, I need some. Hey, there's Ron Ardouin. Finally made it. Do I have an interesting crappie story? Whew, let me ponder that a minute. No. I really don't. I don't know that I have any interesting crappie stories. Give me a minute to think about that. Maybe or so. Okay, Harrison Davis, my hero of Palm Boss, even at 21. Yeah, right. I wish I was. I am now. Yep. Let's see, Josh. You ever thought about having other ponds? Yes, I have. I've done that. I have. I've had actually on the YouTube page. John Dyer has put together some videos. I don't know if the crappie videos on them, but he went back to like 2018 and pulled up some old shows that he thought was interesting, and he's pulled clips from those shows where I was talking with Greg Grimes. So I've had Greg Grimes on this show. I've had Bruce Condello. I've had oh gosh, I can't think of everybody. Matt Rail, Mike Otto. I've had guests over and over and over a lot, and I may do that again. I don't know. Actually, I don't plan anything for this show. I just show up and do it. But I may do that again. I just need to kind of think about it. This past 6 or 8 months has been just kind of hectic, crazy, busy, but that's changed now. The things that created busyness for me have now gotten back into good order. I'll leave it right there. There's Dave Sefton from Brownstown, Illinois, one of the premier pond builders in his part of the planet. Everybody calls him Mongo. Happy holidays, Dave Sefton. Good to see you checking in, buddy. Interesting crappie stories. You know, the most interesting crappie story that I think I can tell you is that Bobby Glennon over at Malone's Fish Hatchery in Arkansas, he's about the only guy that I know that has dedicated any significant effort into trying to develop hybrid crappie, triploid crappie, a crappie that does, if anybody could crack the nut on crappie that don't reproduce, that would be a home run. I guess the most interesting story that I've heard about crappie is there's 4 or 5 guys that said, you know what, I want to try the hybrid striper and crappie business to see if the hybrid stripers can control reproduction. And then they stocked something like threadfin shad and golden shiners as a forage fish. But, every time I followed up with that, it's a little too early to tell, or we don't really know the results. But I guess the most interesting thing about crappie is that they're predictably unpredictable. They run in cycles. You may go through 3 or 4 years of the best crappie fishing you've ever seen and thinking that everything's clicking. And then all of a sudden it just goes south like now, and then it sucks for a few years and then it comes back, And so, the bigger the body of water, the more pronounced that seems to be. So that's about all I can tell you about crappie. I'm going to scroll back here and see if there's anything I've missed. Matthew, I'm serious. Email me at info@palmos.com. Give me your phone number. I'll call you. Don Adam, welcome all pond meisters. Our ponds are all frozen tight. Really? Holy cow, where are you? Let me see if I can see where you're from. Okay. Nope, I don't see where you live. But if your ponds are frozen in, you must be way up north. Daniel Weaver, best way to keep open water for my ducks, aerate. If you'll aerate with a bottom diffused aeration system, then you can keep a hole in the ice. I would do it fairly shallow in water like less than 5 feet deep, which that's about the shallowest you should use a diffused aeration system in. Now, something you got to remember about diffused aeration systems is moisture has a tendency to collect from condensation inside the hoses of a diffused aeration system. And it can get cold enough that condensation inside the hoses can freeze and block the hose. So you kind of got to be patient about that. Don Adam, where are you from, buddy? I'm fixing it's already 8:29. I'm going to have to rock and roll here in a minute. So let's see what else I missed. Bob Jones, shut down until spring here, Southern Illinois. Yep, I can sure see that. Can anyone stop Indiana, those wild Mendoza brothers this playoff season? Harrison Davis. The Aggies can, if they get there. Everybody just rolled their eyes. I'm not rolling mine. Hey, I get to go to that Aggie-Miami playoff game here on the 20th. My son came up with some tickets. Okay, let me see here. I think we're about there. You know what? It's 8:30. This hour flew by. I mean, I really appreciate you guys. Let's see here. Let's see what Kyle Edwards says. How about I'm thinking about trying some muck removal pellets or blocks. You have any concerns about using those or how to get them the most bang for my buck? Well, okay, so I would talk with Landon Wyatt of Natural Lake Biosciences. Look him up. Because what he does is he does custom blends based on your need. Now, this in the January-February issue of the magazine, I've got Landon Wyatt and his right-hand man Patrick writing an article that's going to be proponents of bacteria, while Dr. Wes Neal from Mississippi State has written one that is opposed to using organic or using bacterial pellets or any kind of microbes that you might buy. So those two articles are going to balance each other out, and you can make a pretty good decision from that. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. So I do appreciate you watching. You help keep me fresh and lively, and which I need that. So thoughts on adding red-breast sunfish to a Nebraska bottom red hybrid? If you can get some red-breast sunfish, I love them. They like moving water, so they're not going to thrive as well in a pond with red ear hybrid, bluegill, and their hybrids, but they'd be fun. So, hey, guys, thanks for watching. I'm not sure where I'll be next Tuesday night, but I got a feeling I'll be hanging out with you. Probably going to be at home for once or twice or three times. So until next Tuesday night, adios for now.